He sat in the far corner. Not because he was hiding, but because men like him had learned long ago that the loudest ones usually knew the least. His jacket was plain, his cap faded, his hands steady. The waitress barely noticed him. The other customers didn't care. Until the laughter started. The table near the counter, 3 men, half his age, with mouths bigger than their sense. They pointed at his walk, his silence, his old boots. One of them said, "Bet he just plays soldier in the mirror." The diner chuckled. But he didn't flinch. He didn't explain. He just kept sipping his coffee like the war was still whispering to him through the steam. And then, the door opened. 6 men stepped in, different builds, same eyes. No words, no warning, just presence. They scanned the room, locked eyes with him, and nodded. The lead one turned toward the mockers and said, "You're in our seat." The room went dead quiet, because suddenly everyone realized this man didn't need to speak for himself. His SEAL team had just walked in. If stories like this make you feel something real, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and share with someone who believes respect is earned. Quietly. Endless stories. Because some heroes never raise their voice, but you hear them anyway. The booth in the far back was always empty except on Wednesdays. It wasn't reserved, but everyone knew it wasn't up for grabs either. There was no sign, no plaque, no name on the table. Just a silent understanding among the locals that that seat, the one beneath the old clock that hadn't worked since 2007, belonged to him. He never came with anyone. Never said more than a few words to the waitress. Never stayed long. But he always came, right at 8:45 a.m. sharp as a rifle click. And when he walked in, the bell above the door jingled softly, the waitress behind the counter would nod, and a black coffee would already be waiting by the time he slid into the booth. He was a quiet man, middle-aged but older around the edges. Gray stubble, faded cap, dark jacket with shoulders that still knew how to carry weight. His boots were worn smooth and didn't make a sound on the tile floor. Most assumed he was just another blue-collar local. Maybe a mechanic. Maybe a guy who worked nights and liked his breakfast in peace. No one knew his name. He never offered it. And after a while, folks stopped asking. Except today, the silence broke. It started with the door slamming harder than usual. Not wind, not accident. 3 guys, mid-20s maybe, loud, entitled, and full of whatever made boys mistake arrogance for confidence. They walked in like the diner owed them something, like the seats had been warmed just for them. Baseball caps turned backwards, chewing gum like it was war, laughing too loud at something on a cracked phone screen. One of them bumped into the quiet man's chair on the way past. "Oops," he said, smirking. "Didn't see the statue." The other 2 chuckled. The man said nothing, just kept stirring his coffee. A slow circle, calm and even. "Hey, Gramps," the second one added, leaning back against the counter. "You here waiting for someone or just reliving old war movies?" The third one squinted at his cap. "What's that say? Navy? You a vet or something?" No response. "Bet he got that online," the first one said. "Probably never served a day. Looks like he gets winded reading the newspaper." The laughter wasn't loud. But in a diner that usually hummed with polite conversation and clinking utensils, it rang. The waitress froze by the coffee pot. The old man 2 booths over looked away. The busboy paused mid-wipe, cloth hovering above a ketchup streak. Still, the man didn't move, didn't speak. He just took a slow sip from his mug, then set it down gently. "Must be deaf," one of them said, stepping closer now. "Hey, I asked if you—" The bell rang again, and this time it wasn't laughter that followed. It was silence. 6 men entered. Not all at once, staggered, smooth, precise. Like muscle memory. They were different sizes, different looks. One in jeans and a flannel. Another in cargo pants. One wore a ball cap. Another, sunglasses despite the clouds. But there was no mistaking them. They walked like wolves. Quiet. Watching. Measured. The air shifted. The waitress blinked twice, then smiled. Not from politeness, but from recognition. The lead one stopped near the front booth. Scanned the diner. His eyes landed on the man in the corner. And he nodded. A silent salute passed between them. Not with hands, but with breath, posture, and the kind of weight that only comes from having once bled next to someone. Then the leader turned, faced the three punks, and said calmly, "You're in our seat. No threat, no profanity, just truth." The guys laughed at first. Then they saw the stance, the scars, the way one of the new arrivals kept his hands slightly raised, not in defense but readiness. The way another shifted his jacket just enough to reveal the corner of a tattoo they didn't recognize, but instinctively feared. One of the punks stepped back. Another tried to speak, failed. And then the last one, the loudest before, muttered, Let's go." They left the same way they came in, loud feet, quiet shame. The man in the corner hadn't said a word. His team had, and that was enough. The six joined him at the booth. No fanfare, just presence. One of them clapped his shoulder. Another slid him a fresh cup of coffee. They didn't need to ask how he was. They already knew, because some brothers don't need words. They just show up, and when they do, the world learns what respect really looks like. They didn't plan to walk in that day, not together, not information, not like they had something to prove. It just happened. A message thread the night before. One of them said, "He still goes to that diner, same booth, same time." Another replied, "I'm passing through town." Then another, and another. No grand reunion, no banner. Just six men who had once been molded in the same fire, answering an unspoken pull they hadn't felt in years. They parked separately, arrived in waves, but they all walked through the same door at 9:07 a.m. sharp. 22 minutes after he had sat down and 15 minutes after the first insult was thrown. Inside, the air was different. Not tense, not loud, just heavier, like everyone had stopped breathing at the same time. The man in the corner hadn't moved, still staring into his coffee, still as stone, but everyone in the diner felt something shift the second the first one walked in. Jake was first, taller than the rest, with a shoulder that never fully healed and a jaw that looked like it had taken more than one punch and returned the favor. Behind him came Diaz, shorter, broader, with that slow roll in his walk that screamed calm until it didn't. Then Harper, then Wells. Then two more whose names didn't matter to the diner, but whose presence landed like thunder without sound. They didn't have to look for him. Their eyes went straight to the corner. He was there. Same booth, same jacket, same silence. And he didn't even flinch when Jake reached him. Just looked up, one nod, and that was it. Years of separation folded into one glance. And in that instant, every man in that room knew exactly who they were looking at. Not six strangers. Not a group of veterans. A SEAL team. Reassembled. Present. Jake turned, scanned the room, and saw the three guys at the counter. Now stiff, pretending not to look. Faces pale like they'd just seen the edge of something sharp and real for the first time in their lives. Jake didn't smile. Didn't raise his voice. He just said the words like he was calling out a range order. "You're in our seat." There was no threat in his tone. But threat wasn't needed, because respect, when spoken by men who've earned it with blood, silence, and loyalty, has its own gravity. It fills a room and anything false gets pushed out. The guys didn't speak. One tried. His voice caught halfway through a syllable. They stood, left bills on the counter they didn't owe, walked toward the door like it was further away than it should be, and disappeared without a backward glance. The SEALs didn't even watch them leave. They slid into the booth one by one, filling the space like a puzzle falling back into place. Nobody in the diner dared interrupt. Even the waitress, who had worked there for 20 years and had once seen a knife pulled at 2 a.m., simply brought another carafe of coffee, refilled each mug without a word, and wiped her eyes on the way back to the counter. The man in the corner, Leonard, finally looked at Jake. "You all came." Jake sipped his coffee. Wasn't a question. Leonard looked down, then back at them. "It's been a while." Harper leaned forward, arms on the table. "We figured it had been long enough." Diaz chuckled. "Figured we'd surprise you." Leonard shook his head. "Nothing surprises me anymore." But that wasn't true. Because when he looked around the booth and saw all six of them, Men he'd carried through the darkest nights. Men who'd pulled him out when he stopped pulling himself. He felt something he hadn't in years. Wait, not the kind that crushes. The kind that reminds you you're still standing. Wells reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. A coin, aged bronze, with an anchor carved into one side and a single word on the back. Brothers. He slid it across the table. Leonard picked it up, turned it over, and finally, for the first time that day, smiled. No one said anything after that. They just sat, drank their coffee, ate a few eggs, and in that silence, something was repaired. Not loudly, not fully, but enough. Because when a man like Leonard is mocked for what he carries, it doesn't take justice to fix it. It takes showing up. And this time, they did. She'd worked at the diner for 17 years and thought she'd seen it all. Midnight drunks, Sunday sermons in coffee cups, teenagers tipping in quarters, truckers who could outtalk politicians, and veterans who said everything without saying a word. But that morning, the one with the old man in the corner, the loud punks by the counter, and the sudden shift in air, that morning became something else. She'd seen him before, of course. Always came in on Wednesdays. Always alone. Never caused trouble. Never asked for anything except the same black coffee and the window seat that looked out toward the gas station across the street. She didn't know his name until much later, but she knew the way he sat. Upright, measured, like someone who used to salute before every meal. And when those three boys started laughing at his silence, his cap, the way he didn't fight back, she felt it in her chest. A sharp little stab that made her want to speak, but didn't know how. It wasn't fear. It was something older, something like shame. Because it wasn't just what they said. It was how the room allowed it to happen. Quiet complicity. Eyes cast down. A town that forgot not just who he was, but what he represented. And then the door opened. The first man wasn't loud, but he changed the entire room. The second confirmed what the first suggested. By the time the sixth walked in, she knew, without being told, that whatever those boys had laughed at, they were now standing in the presence of what they thought only existed in movies. She didn't know all the details, didn't recognize ranks or units, but she recognized gravity when she saw it. The kind of weight that doesn't bend under pressure but creates silence around itself. When the tallest one said, "You're in our seat," she wanted to cry. Not because of the words, because of the tone. Calm, unapologetic, truth wrapped in steel. The boys left without protest. The man in the corner didn't even move. She refilled their mugs without asking. One of them nodded. Another touched her wrist gently as if to say thank you for seeing this. But it wasn't her who needed thanks. It was them. Because for the first time in years, she saw something she didn't realize she'd been missing. A reminder that honor doesn't fade with age, and real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just walks in, quiet, unstoppable. And when it leaves everything just a little more whole than it found it. They never talked about the ridge. Not in the years that followed. Not at the reunions they didn't attend. Not in the silence that hung in their text messages. And definitely not over the coffee they now shared in that small-town diner. But it lived between them. Like a breath they all held, too heavy to release, too sacred to explain. It was 2006. Somewhere in the Korangal Valley. A recon mission that turned into a firestorm. They were 5 miles past fallback range, radio silent, half a map, and full adrenaline. The insertion had been textbook. The extraction was hell. The terrain turned against them. Trees caught fire. Enemy flanked both sides. Their point man took a round to the chest. Then their comms got hit. For 13 hours they were ghosts. Bleeding, crawling, dragging, firing. They lost their bearings. Lost their ammo, nearly lost their sanity. And then Leonard happened. Not like a hero in a movie. Not yelling orders or throwing grenades. He just moved. With precision. With purpose. While the others braced for the end, he calculated routes. While their medic bled out trying to stabilize another man, Leonard applied pressure, cut sleeves, whispered counts to keep the pulse going. And when the air support said they couldn't get close because of visibility, that extraction was off, Leonard didn't panic. He stood, slung the smallest man on his back, ordered the rest to crawl in line, 10 feet apart, and said one sentence they would never forget. "Don't stop. If I fall, you step over me and keep going." They didn't step over him, because he never fell. He carried 2 men out of the valley, both bleeding, one unconscious, all without firing another shot. Not because he couldn't, but because he knew making noise would mean more dying. He didn't need to fight anymore. He needed to finish. When they reached the evac point, he collapsed before the medics could even ask who was who. They had to pry the dog tags from his fingers. And the report? It got buried. The mission was deemed too sensitive, too messy, too politically inconvenient. Only 3 lines were kept in the record. Team extracted. 3 wounded. 1 uninjured. They called Leonard uninjured, because his wounds didn't show. Not on skin. But every man at that table knew. He had never walked the same after that day. Never spoke the same either. He stopped attending briefings. Requested early exit. Never asked for medals. Never corrected anyone who thought he was just another quiet man. And so when those punks in the diner laughed at him that morning, none of the team felt anger. They felt disbelief. Because if they had seen what Leonard carried, truly seen, they would have sat in silence and thanked the floor beneath their feet for being so blessed. And that's why they showed up. Not to defend him, but to remind him that while the government might have left his name off a page, they never had. Because real soldiers don't salute uniforms. They salute men who never stopped carrying others. Even when no one remembered. The headline came out 2 days later. Local veterans confront teens after diner harassment. It was printed in bold, set just above the fold, with a grainy photo of the diner's exterior and a stock image of military boots below it. The article told a neat version of the story, a sanitized paragraph about an incident involving a group of former military personnel and several young men, followed by a lukewarm statement from the diner owner, and a short quote from a police spokesperson saying no charges were filed. They got the date right. They got the diner's name right. But they got everything else so incredibly wrong. They missed the weight in the room. The hush that fell like a curtain the moment the SEALs walked in. They didn't capture the way the waitress's hand trembled when she poured the coffee. They didn't mention how the 3 young men, loud just minutes earlier, left looking like boys who'd finally seen the difference between power and presence. And they definitely didn't name the man who had been sitting quietly in the corner booth long before the article's deadline even existed. His name wasn't in the piece. Not once. Not even as a passing mention. Just an unidentified older man. As if his silence made him invisible. As if history didn't walk through the door with him. Leonard didn't read the paper. He never did. But Jake did. So did Diaz. They passed it between themselves that afternoon, seated on a bench behind the hardware store where they used to meet after runs during training. Not to work out, but to remember who they had once been. Wells folded the paper, tapped the front page twice, and muttered, "We should have known, because stories like Leonard's don't make headlines. Not unless someone dies. Not unless there's a medal, a scandal, or a name big enough to trend. Quiet dignity isn't profitable. Quiet heroism doesn't get clicks. And the truth is, they didn't show up at the diner to make news. They showed up because that man once carried them all out of hell without asking for a thank you. The least they could do was carry the weight of his name back into the world. One step at a time. Jake didn't say much. He just pulled out a marker, walked over to the front page, and drew a line through the phrase, "Unidentified older man." Then, in clear block letters above it, he wrote, "Leonard J. Walters, Navy SEAL, our brother, our backbone." They took a photo, posted it. No hashtags, no tags, just the image. And a single sentence. "The world forgot. We didn't." The post wasn't meant to go viral. It was for them, the team. A digital marker for something the world had skipped over. But overnight, the photo made its way across timelines like a quiet wave too strong to ignore. By morning, it had reached over 200,000 people. Veterans groups started sharing it. Some left comments. Some just dropped salutes. And then came the one message that changed everything. From a middle school teacher in Ohio. "One of my students just asked who Leonard Walters is. He wants to do his history project on him." The teacher didn't expect a response. She just wanted to say thank you. But when Jake saw the message, he sent it to the team group chat. It sat for a few minutes in silence. Then Wells wrote, "Tell the kid he picked the right story." 3 days later, the boy Liam, age 12, baseball cap too big for his head, stood in front of his class with a trifold display made from poster board, some printed screenshots, and a hand-drawn American flag. He didn't use a PowerPoint. He didn't have animations. Just a paper taped at the top that read, Leonard J. Walters, the hero nobody wrote about. His voice shook a little at first, but as he spoke, it steadied. He told them about a man who used to sit alone in a diner booth, about a team that walked in without music, without cameras, and made the whole place stop breathing. He talked about respect, about how being loud doesn't make you brave, how some heroes don't wear medals on their chest, they carry them in silence. And then he said the line that stopped the room. "If I ever meet him, I won't say thank you. I'll just sit next to him. 'Cause I think that's what he'd want." His teacher took a photo of the project, sent it back to the original thread. Within hours, the team had seen it, so had thousands of others. And in that moment, Leonard Walters was no longer a ghost in the background of a headline. He was a name spoken by the next generation, out loud, with meaning. And maybe that's all any man like him ever wanted. Not to be celebrated, not to be famous, but to be remembered by someone young enough to carry the story forward. Someone who knew that silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's earned. The letter came in an envelope with no stamp. Just his name, printed in neat type on a plain white label, tucked into the frame of his apartment door. Leonard nearly tossed it into the drawer where unopened things went to fade, but something about the weight of the paper stopped him. Inside, a single page, not official, not government. Just a short note from a journalism student at a small Midwest university. "Sir, I know this might feel intrusive, but I heard your name in my younger brother's class. He came home talking about you like you were a legend. I did my research and what I found was silence. I don't want to interview you because you're a SEAL. I want to talk to the man no one thought to ask." He read it once, then again, then folded it without expression and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket. He didn't answer right away. He didn't plan to answer at all. But the next morning, as he passed the diner window and saw that same old booth, something tugged. Not regret, not pride, just unfinished business. 2 days later, the student showed up with a notebook and a voice recorder, visibly nervous. She introduced herself twice. Leonard just nodded toward the bench across from him. She asked the first question, something simple, respectful, but he didn't respond. Just watched the steam rise from his coffee like it carried the ghosts of men who once shouted his name across valleys of dust and blood. Then she said, "You don't have to tell me about the mission. I'm not after war stories. I want to know who you were the day after." That stopped him, because no one had ever asked that. Everyone wanted to know the mission, the bullets, the scars. But no one asked about the silence after it all ended. No one asked what it felt like to buy milk at a grocery store when you used to carry men who screamed for their mothers. No one asked how it felt to hear teenagers mock your limp in public and choose to let them. Not because you couldn't destroy them, but because your life had already carried too much destruction. So he told her. Not everything, but enough. He told her about the team, about the man he carried, about the moment he decided not to fire back because silence would save more lives than gunfire ever could. He told her about the medal that never came, the file that vanished, and the breakfast booth that became his battlefield of memory. And when it was over, he didn't wait for thanks. He just said, "Don't make this about the uniform. Make it about the weight." She nodded, swallowed hard, pressed stop on the recorder, and whispered, "Thank you for letting the silence speak." That night, she posted a single sentence on her page. "The bravest man I ever met didn't tell me a story. He handed me the quiet. Came in a plain brown box. No escort, no cameras, no folded flag or honor guard waiting on the front porch. Just a UPS driver who didn't look twice when Leonard opened the door." "You Leonard Walters?" the man asked, clipboard in hand. Leonard nodded, signed, took the box, closed the door, It was heavier than it looked. He didn't open it right away. Set it on the kitchen table beside his half-full mug of coffee and sat down slowly, like the chair had to earn his weight. The apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the old clock that always ran 2 minutes behind. When he did open it, the flaps resisted, like even cardboard knew what it was carrying. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a metal he'd never applied for, never expected, and certainly never thought would find its way to him after all these years. The Navy Cross. A folded letter lay on top. "Mr. Walters, we know this is late. We know silence followed your actions more closely than recognition. We hope this restores not your record but your name. On behalf of the United States Navy, we thank you for what you did when no one saw and who you remained when everyone looked away. Office of Naval Personnel." No signature, no official seal. Just typed words on crisp paper, simple, clear, and 31 years too late. Leonard stared at the medal for a long time. Not because he didn't believe it, because he did. And that made it harder. He'd spent decades making peace with being erased. Learned to hold dignity without evidence. Learned that medals didn't stop nightmares, and silence didn't mean absence. But holding that piece of metal now, it wasn't validation. It was memory made physical. It was a name that had finally circled back after taking the long way through time. He didn't hang it, didn't post about it. He placed it gently into the same wooden box that held Mitchell's letter, the napkin from the little girl, and the coin his team gave him years ago. Then closed the lid and breathed, not like a man receiving glory, but like one laying it to rest. Because sometimes the medal isn't the reward. It's the final word on a sentence that never needed to be spoken. It wasn't part of the curriculum. The teacher hadn't planned for it. It wasn't on the whiteboard, nor inside the printed lesson plan from the district. But something about the way Liam had stood during his project the week before, the way he had spoken Leonard Walters' name like it belonged to all of them, had changed the room. Now, a week later, on a cloudy Thursday morning, the classroom fell silent as Liam walked to the front once again. This time, no project board, no poster, just a folded sheet of paper in one hand and something he gripped tightly in the other, a small, printed copy of the Navy Cross. He didn't speak for the first 10 seconds, just looked up, scanned the room of his classmates and said, "We all talk about heroes like they live in books, but one of them used to sit alone at a booth 10 minutes from here." A few students shifted in their chairs. One looked up from a phone, but none of them interrupted. Liam continued. He never told anyone what he did. He never asked for thanks. He didn't go on the news or write a book. He just showed up. Every week. Same seat. Same coffee. And when 3 people tried to embarrass him for being quiet, 6 others walked in. Not to defend him, but to remind everyone who he really was. The teacher watched from the back of the room, arms folded, heart still. Liam unfolded the paper, read a few words from the citation edited for their age, and then looked up again. They gave him this medal, not because he asked, because someone remembered. And maybe that's the real story. He paused, lowered the paper, then opened his hand and showed them a small pin. Not real gold, not official. Just a replica he'd made from his printer at home. "I made these," he said, "not for decoration, but so no one here ever says, 'I don't know who Leonard Walters is.'" He walked to the first desk, handed one out, then another, and another. By the time he reached the last row, no one was talking. Even the usual whisperers had gone quiet, because something had shifted. They didn't know Leonard, but they felt him. And when the bell rang, not a single student stood. They waited, until Liam, voice softer now, said, "Sometimes the bravest men don't raise their voice, but they raise the rest of us." Then quietly the class stood as one, not because they were told, but because it felt like the only thing to do. The name wasn't carved in stone, not yet, but it was printed on a plaque that now hung in a corner of the town library. The same corner where the veterans section used to be 3 shelves of dust and a half-broken DVD player. After the classroom story spread, after Liam's project made its way into the school newsletter, something shifted beyond social media. The town council voted to honor him. Quietly, no parade, no news vans, just a new wooden bench in front of the museum with a single brass inscription. Leonard J. Walters carried more than most, asked for less than any. They didn't hold a ceremony, because no one could picture him sitting through one. Instead, they opened the museum early on a rainy Saturday and invited anyone who wanted to come pay their respects. They didn't expect a crowd, but they came. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Veterans in wheelchairs, kids holding laminated printouts, a woman who once served him coffee without knowing his name, a man who said Leonard saved his father in '06 but never wanted it mentioned. People came not because they knew him personally, but because the space he'd left behind felt real, tangible, like someone had finally made room in the world for the kind of hero that doesn't ask to be remembered. The booth at the diner stayed empty that week. Not because it was roped off, because no one dared sit there. The waitress placed a cup of black coffee there every Wednesday anyway. Not because he was coming, but because something in her said the seat still mattered. The team, Jake, Diaz, Wells, Harper, all of them came back for that day. They stood behind the museum, out of view, no speeches, no uniform, just present, like always. And when a boy asked, "Did you really fight with him?" Jake just nodded and said, "No, he fought for us." They didn't stay long, didn't need to. The story had outgrown them now. And Leonard, he was gone, but not lost, because every now and then, someone new would sit at that library corner, or in the school hallway, or at a bus stop and whisper the name, Leonard Walters. And when they did, the silence that followed didn't feel empty, felt full, like legacy, like respect, like the kind of story that doesn't end when the man does, but when the last person stops telling it. And no one was planning to stop. Thank you for staying with us through Leonard Walters' quiet, powerful legacy. In a world that often forgets the ones who never ask for credit, this was our chance to remember a man who carried others, and never once asked to be carried himself. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone who deserves to be heard, don't let it end here. Like the video, share it with someone who believes in quiet strength. And subscribe to Endless Stories, where forgotten heroes finally find their voice. One story at a time. Endless Stories, because some names live forever, even when they're spoken in silence.